Hello and welcome to Suzi's Book Bag. Today's book bag comes from Europa Editions, the publisher, and the book that I'm going to be talking about mostly today does have quite a European focus. I also liked the quote on it. I'm not wise, but I read a lot of novels, and this is from an Elena Ferrante novel. The whole idea about what we can learn from novels is rather moot because novelists are notoriously tricksy people who are not telling us the whole truth all of the time. So what we think we learn might be completely bogus. You've probably also spotted that I have customized today's tote bag with a couple of tarot cards, again very appropriate to the book in question. One is the Magician, and the other is the Wheel of Fortune. The lead character of the novel we're going to discuss is very much bound to the Wheel of Fortune and whirls round and round in the course of the book. We will be talking about the Warlock Effect, a fabulous novel, and I have two people in a very crowded book bag today. So I'd like to welcome now Andy Nyman and Jeremy Dyson, who are the authors of this novel. Welcome.
Hello, Suzi.
Hello, Suzi. Hello.
It is cramped in here, but we'll manage.
A lovely little book bag.
I have many. I have hundreds, actually. You know, we're going to be showcasing lots of them along the way. But I didn't have a magic themed one, which seemed a shame. So maybe you should have a word with your publishers.
Good idea.
This book is. You will learn things from this book, actually. One of the things you'll learn is how to do a couple of very nifty tricks. And speaking more broadly, some of the kind of techniques that go behind magic. So let's go to Andy. I mean, you are a professional magician. You've worked with Derren Brown, as well as an actor. I mean, you're both Renaissance men, basically. But can I ask you, Andy, when did you first become fascinated by the art and lore of magic?
Well, I always loved it when I was a kid. I think primarily because my uncle Harold did a few very good tricks. He wasn't really a magician, but he had a book from his childhood that he'd learned a couple of tricks from. So whenever we'd go to Manchester to see them, he would do this card trick, this one particular card trick that always fascinated me. But what was most brilliant in what he did was he really kept the secret. And I would think he did that trick probably from when I was 7, and he didn't tell me the secret till I was about 15, 16. And it was truly a brilliant trick. And he also, one time they came to visit us in Leicester, which is where I'm from. And they all went to a garden fete. I was feeling a bit poorly, so I didn't go. And they came back and he bought me a magic set from the garden fete. And they were the things really, and I didn't really, most magic sets actually, in sort of back then, the instructions were terrible, impenetrable, and the props were all sort of plastic and not great. But within that, the design of it was so wondrous. In fact, I can grab it for you when Jeremy's answering the question and show you the design of it, because there's something truly wonderful about that. So I loved the world of it instantly, but didn't really do much. And there was a magic shop in Leicester that I'd gone to, and all of that excitement lay dormant really and truly until I was 15, when at Jewish summer camp I was put in the same dormitory as I'm going to grab the box while Jeremy tells you.
Okay, over to you, Jeremy.
Well, I'll pick up the story. Well, I mean, my early interest in magic was very similar to Andy's. One of the seeds was a great uncle who I believe had been in the concert party during the war and did a few tricks. But also I'd sing magicians at children's parties, seeing an amazing magician live when I was about 7 in Harrogate at the theatre, the great Cavari, who's a terrific magician. All of that accumulated. And then being taken to a magic shop The first one being on the Joke and Magic Shop on the North Pier in Blackpool, which was an absolute epiphany. That's not overstating it. Walking in there, and it was like an explosion in my imagination. And then my brother was very into chess and kind of playing at quite a high level. So I wanted to try and find a hobby that was completely different, I think, so that because he was very competitive, so that he couldn't go into that area. And so magic sort of got formalized into a hobby when I was about 11, and I won a school prize that was a lovely book called Magic of the Masters. That was a readily available book, but it was a notch above the magic sets that Andy talked about. And at the back, it had addresses you could write off to proper professional magic companies, and they had house magazines. One of them, the Supreme Magic Company in Bideford, Devon, had a magazine called The Magigram, and I started subscribing, and suddenly I was in this world of professional magicians, this arcane parallel world that lay people knew nothing about, which had its own publishing houses, books that you could not get in bookshops, that you could only get from these publishing houses, mail order, with the real secrets in. And that was it. Then I was off, and I started entertaining at children's parties for pocket money, very good pocket money, and did that from being about 12, starting with my younger sister, all the way through to university, other side of university. So was doing that for a good 10 years or more.
So let me show you a couple of things then. So this was the magic set.
Wow.
And that design, it's just remarkable because it's sort of 70s, but it also has a sort of Bauhaus feel to it, or something. Extraordinary merging of worlds. And then the interior, is equally sort of beautiful, but I'll try and hold this up so it doesn't all fall out. So there you go. So that was the magic set, but deeply impenetrable instructions. And then as this is book club, let me show you the books we're talking about. So this was my Uncle Harold's book, which he then gifted me in later years. It's from 1938. It's called Modern Conjuring for Amateurs. I mean, God, it's got that gorgeous musty smell. It was published by Elliston's, which was a big magic shop department store, and has wonderful things. But as Jeremy also says, in the back of here are these magnificent adverts for things that, Magician's Obedient Ball, egg and I mean, it's just a world that even now in this internet age where everything is accessible, that's sort of befuddling. And then this is the book Jeremy is talking about, which is Jack Delvin, who went on to become the president of the Magic Circle. That's the Magic of the Masters, filled with brilliant tricks and diagrams and methodologies. And what's amazing is, to this day, any of these books and the more modern versions that you'll find in, I was about to say W.H. Smith's, but they've all sort of gone, but bookshops, you can learn truly, truly brilliant, staggering magic tricks that really open your eyes to this whole world. And with the Warlock Effect, it was something that really excited us both to, within the world of the thriller, to teach a couple of tricks, because not only is that an exciting thing, and hopefully you'll inspire more people to get into magic, because it's such a magnificent hobby for many reasons. But the other thing is the gift of the sort of lateral thinking that magic gives you, that is also so akin to the espionage world. And so we loved the marriage of those two worlds. Really sit side by side, and in sort of sharing a couple of what are quite rudimentary secrets, but mind expanding, because you suddenly realize in a very easy way things that until they're explained to you seem impossible, how simply they can be achieved, how brilliantly clever the smoke and mirrors can befuddle your mind. So it's a magnificent thing.
Whose idea was it to combine the spy thriller with magic? Because that seems really original. Did you both come up with it?
Right,
Jeremy?
we've been talking about it for a long time. So it was an idea. The seed of the idea was there a long time ago, actually predating when we started collaborating together creatively. And what happened was when we'd finished the film of Ghost Stories and we just delivered the final finished thing, we started talking about what we'd love to do next, what would be a dream project. And we're exploring, would it be another horror film? Would it be a different kind of film? And we were thinking, wouldn't it be fascinating if we did to do in a big adventure film like Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is a favorite of ours. And then the seed of the magician spy started to fruit. It was like, oh, that's a very cinematic idea. So we did actually start working it up as a film, the first act, certainly. And then this opportunity arose to actually do it as a book. And we jumped at it because it made just as much sense to write it as a novel. And so that was the journey, really. So the seed had been there for a long time. And, because to us, there's something... It was sort of one of those ideas where once you say it out loud, it's, well, of course, because we were both massive James Bond fans as kids, and the moment in every Bond film where he gets delivered his new kit by Q, they're just magic tricks. It's exactly the same thrill. It's the watch with the cheese wire hidden in it, or later.
There's the golden gun sitting behind me that comes apart. It's
a cigarette lighter that becomes a gun.
That's one of my favorite scenes in any movie, and actually I think the man with the golden gun, just beats Citizen Kane hands down. There's very little wrong with that movie. It's
definitely an underrated Bond film when you revisit
Roger is underrated. Everything is perfect. I think there's one sound effect I don't really like when the car flies over the bridge. It goes whoop. No, we didn't need that, but absolutely everything else is masterly. And we're going to get onto that Coogan and Bryson thing in a moment and start doing impressions. But I totally agree. I hadn't really factored Bond into the Warlock Effect. I thought he was quite Sherlockian.
Well, there's a Sherlockian thing, but also the espionage world, as well as the sort of gadgetry or the sort of thinking of Bond. Actually, I think we're more akin to Len Dayton, and we love the sort of, and Le Carré. We love the mundanity of, again, it's something that really runs through our work. It was very much there in Ghost Stories. There's a sort of mundanity of Britishness that we really, really like. And there's something about the Cold War that it's hard to not feel that period is drizzly. And we sort of really, we sort of love the mundane married with the fantastical. They're both, it's a really exciting combination.
Well, and another thing we both love is the sort of the duality of the theatre, where front of house is plush velvet and polished brass, and then there's this wonderful expression in theatre where the carpet ends, so that when you go backstage, it's tatty and rough, and the walls are unadorned, and it's just bare brick, and that's in there too. That you've got both those things going on at the same time, and that stepping out from the backstage world into the performance is, there's something schizophrenic about it that's fascinating. That also echoes that Bond thing that you have, because it's unspoken in the book, but the book is set in 1953, which is the same year as Casino Royale, and that's not accidental. And one of the things that you get in Bond is this more duality is it was written in austerity. It was the tail end of austerity, and one of the things that made it so popular was, again, it was giving you this high life that nobody else had. You know, that Bond was knew his wines, knew his cigars, knew his food, was in casinos, was flying around the world. And again, to have that contrast between a rainy, grimy London and that is another similar pleasure.
But there's also the glamorous / seedy world of Soho, and I love the way that there's a little bit of a dancing girls and sparkles and sequin. You know, the world of magic is all about that as well, isn't it?
Oh, we love it. I mean, I went to the circus yesterday, and it's the same world. I just love it so much. That sequins and sparkles and fishnets and top hats. I mean, it's so seedy, but
well, and also the other thing is that so much of our entertainment industry, the entertainment industry that we grew up, you know, when we were kids in the 1970s into the 80s, we were being entertained by people who've been formed by that world, and they all came out of the Windmill Theatre. Everybody, you know, every comic you ever loved, writers included, they all started at the Windmill in between the strippers and the nude vignettes, and that's all part of that as well. It's the seediness, the mix, something, the edge of it, and yet all these kind of brilliant minds being forged in that low place. There's something fascinating about that too.
There's a nice little cameo for Tommy Cooper, who I'd forgotten he was a magician, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Cooper. Oh yeah, absolutely,
a proper one.
Oh yeah, for real. And as we say in the book, as well as we mentioned, he was a desert rat. There's a huge amount of. That's one of the things we love, is the blurring of the edges. You know, there's an enormous amount of truth and a real period detail, obviously, but real period characters. Just not quite doing what they did, but we're sort of applying the skills that they had, and it's not just the obvious ones. You know, there are characters all the way through who are, some of them have got the same names, and some of them are amalgams of other people that we know and admire, and you're taking what their skill sets were and dropping them into this world and thinking, oh, you know what, he was a great lock picker, he was a terrific pickpocket, and we have more of these people that in the ensuing books, you know, we can draw on. I mean, it's a very, very rich world.
Well, let's talk about somebody you definitely have imagined, which is your central character, Lewis Warlock. Is he an amalgam, or have you? Let's go to Jeremy for that.
Yeah, he was certainly inspired by a number of 50s magicians, or magicians who were working in the 50s. They're definitely feeding into it. So magic was very popular on the radio, which is hard for us to understand in our visual age. But there was an act called the Piddingtons, who had a very successful BBC radio show. They were a husband and wife. Or they were girlfriend and boyfriend originally, and then they got married, and they would do a mind reading double act in kind of very extraordinary and creative settings. Like one of them would be in a plane, and one of them would be sort of down on the ground, and all kinds of stuff. Very really pushing at the envelope what was achieved, and then what you could achieve. And then there was Maurice Fogel was another mind reader and magician who would appear on the radio, and Al Koran as well. So Louis is and David Berglass, who was just starting to perform then, and he had a terrific eye for publicity stunt, how to get publicity, how to grab the media's attention. So I think all of those were feeding into Louis' skill set, definitely. And of course, at least three of them were Jewish, which was another thing we were aware of as two Jewish people. That, like much of the entertainment industry, you know, there was a heavy Jewish presence, and there's something very interesting about this overlap with Judaism and mind reading, because Judaism has quite a mystical side that we both felt when we were kids, you know, when you're taken to synagogue as a kid, and just the service is full of mysticism, and then realizing that you've got mezuzahs in your home on your doorposts, which are tiny little scrolls in little boxes sewn in, fastened to the top of the door. There's a big overlap with that, with this type kind of brand of mind reading mentalism, that's drawing on a similar feel. And it's a subtle thing, but we were quite sensitive to that too. It fits, you know, it's a good fit. And because Louis' Jewish identity is part of what's going underneath the story, that felt appropriate from the get-go.
Andy, can you talk a little bit about Louis' character and his backstory before we even meet him?
Yeah, I mean, in the sort of prologue, we meet him as a young boy in a very frosty boarding school, British boarding school. And he's a boy fresh off, I mean, it's not actually the Kindertransport, but he's fled Nazi Germany on his own, you know, like many of those children, and found himself dropped into a world where he knows nobody, is a fish out of water. And not only that, as you know, as a European Jew, there's a great air of suspicion around who you are, what that weird language is that you speak as you are forced to try and assimilate. And in that first forward, we learn actually the one thing that is his safety blanket / deflector of bullies / weapon to get him out of trouble is a deck of cards, because he was taught a couple of tricks on the way over, actually, from Germany, and he already had a little love of magic. And then we leap forward into 12, 13 years later, when Louis has grafted his way through the working men's clubs or the nightclubs and dinner parties and become something of a star in the British cabaret scene, a popular star with his partner Dinah Gruel, who is his girlfriend, and they do this wonderful mentalism act, as well as him doing sort of acts of prestidigitation. And his character he's really interesting because he has all the ego of a star, but he also has the Yiddish would be seichel, this common sense to know that he's better with a team. And he has this wonderful team, secret team of writers who help him develop. They are called the Brains Trust, and they're a wonderful sort of ragtag team from the variety world who all have separate skills, and they all meet whenever there is a problem posed to create that means it has to be solved and new material created, and they all meet in the upstairs of patisserie Maison Berthaud.
Are you funded by them in some way, or do you get free cakes?
We're not, but we both, it's so funny the way things happen, because we were thinking about where would be great for them to meet in the West End, you know, and all these places that used to be there, and we both adore Maison Berthaud. One of us just sort of said, well, what about, because it's still there. That's the incredible thing. It's been there since 1870. There are 3 places left in Soho that are still original. Maison Berthaud is one of them. The Algerian coffee shop is the other amazing place, and Bar Italia. Bar Italia has been there since, I think, the early 50s. Maison Algerian coffee shop since 1878, and I think Maison Berthaud has been there since about 1860. And they still make everything upstairs. It's completely independently owned. I was in there a couple of weeks ago listening to a phenomenal row between the staff in French with them screaming at each other. And you just think it's what Soho used to be. It's so glorious. So the minute we stumbled on that, we both felt, as is the best thing with a collaboration, when you hit on something that just fills you both with, oh, and that was where Maison Berthaud came from.
There is also a reference to a place close to my heart, briefer reference, which is the National Liberal Club,
Yes.
which is of which I am a member, and I have to say that there's, I mean, when you go in, there's just this amazing staircase, like wow, which doesn't really get much of a mention. So I was a little bit disappointed with that. Maybe in future books.
The reason that's there is because one of my favourite hotels in London is the Royal Horse Guards, which used to be the National Liberal Club. They kind of, half of it's still the National Liberal Club, but the other half is now that hotel. And when I stay in London, I will occasionally treat myself or the family to a night at the Royal Horse Guards, and so it's that, because it's one of the secret places in London. It's not as well known as a lot of the other luxury hotels, and it's got the most incredible view if you're lucky enough to be able to bag a Thames view room right across the South Bank and London Eye, as it is now. So that's that. Hence the National Liberal Club. Yeah,
Well,
I love of the building.
Next time you're down, you'll have to come up and have a drink. We've got a very nice view from the River Terrace as well.
Yeah. I'll take you up on that.
I was fascinated to. I'm always fascinated when there's a collaboration between two writers. I mean, writing a novel doesn't seem something that gives itself to collaboration. And I've interviewed various people who've done this, and there's a lot of, I write a chapter, they write a chapter, then we swap. Or, I mean, how does it work with the writing? I mean, is there one ideas person and one little little grunt worker, or
it's very fluid process, because we've been collaborating, writing together since 2008, as was the very dawn of Ghost Stories, or what became Ghost Stories. So we already had an established way of working, which is there's a lot of talking.
But for a novel, I mean, I can imagine, I don't know, film and dialogue and play, but all the sort of bits that glue the whole story together.
Well, we divvy up. So rather like other pairs of people who write, we divvy up, and then same thing. Yeah, we kind of write our bits initially and then pass them back and forth and work on each other's bits, and and it gets glued together as a whole, something like that.
What are your strengths as a writer? Oh no, maybe I'll do it the other way around. Jeremy, what are Andy's strengths as a writer?
Well, he's fierce, head full of ideas, and a very keen editorial eye for what speaks to an audience, what speaks to a reader. I think that's one of the things that I love about working with him, is I'll miss things or think things are bland or there's nothing to them, and he'll spot that their huge appeal, or the potentially huge appeal.
And Andy, what about Jeremy? What are his strengths?
Well, as you'll glean when you sort of talk to us, Jeremy is definitely the brains of the operation. He's brilliantly scholarly and cerebral in a way that I'm not. And so, Jeremy's a much more experienced writer than I am. And so brings, not only the most brilliant imagination and sense of humor and depth, depth of understanding, but just the most brilliant craftsmanship from 30 plus years of honing his skills. So I feel very blessed, more so actually. I mean, I always feel blessed to work with him because I adore him, but more so on this project than the screenwriting projects or the playwriting projects, because I'm in awe of his literary ability. So it's been, what he does is absolutely incredible. So that they're really, the tip of the iceberg of what Jeremy brings to it.
Anything that annoys you about him, or is it all absolutely perfect?
Suzi. Yeah, I mean, the truth of a collaboration is sort of always that, you're balancing your egos, which is, it's easy to just think egos are negative, but it isn't. It's essential you both have an ego, especially as a freelancer, because you've got to believe in yourself enough that you can, endure the slings and arrows and just keep going and believe somehow against all the odds you're going to be able to afford to pay your mortgage and look after your family. So you have to be made of strong stuff. When there's two of you and you're made of strong stuff, you need to find, what's worth fighting for, and be humble enough to know, not about when you've lost a fight that you back down, but be humble enough to understand, oh no, I was wrong. And also humble enough to think, I am right, but we'll go with what you're saying this time sometimes. So, there are times you do piss each other off. We've been working together for 12 years. A lot of marriages don't last that. No, 15 years or something. A lot of marriages do not last that long. So that would be my answer.
And Jeremy, who knows more about magic? Are you about on par?
And now Andy knows more because he's had that. I mean, Andy he'll be modest about it because it's one of the things he doesn't actually sing from the rooftops of. But he's one of the most respected magicians in the world. I mean, because he guards his acting career because that is his primary love, and the magic has run alongside it. He tends to downplay his magical achievements, but he is one of the most respected magicians in the world. That's not hyperbole. He is. He's co-created everything that Derren Brown's done on stage, and the Derren Brown, what Derren is, and Derren is one of the greatest magicians that there ever was, and Andy is an integral part of that. So he doesn't just have a sort of encyclopedic knowledge of magical history or techniques. He's got that on the ground experience of how to capture an audience's imagination and how to fool the hell out of them. That's unparalleled. So to be able to tap into that, even a fragment of that while we were working, and to see how we could use that for dramatic effect or narrative effect has been an extraordinary, amazing privilege, and we look forward to carrying it on as well, because it's endless. There's the fascination of that, what the kind of window onto the human mind that experience gives you. And Andy's got the most fascinating stories about some of his experiences with some of those secrets, and there's plenty that he won't tell me, because he does jealously guard his secrets. So I'm not party to. There's only a fraction of it that I get let in on.
Well, we haven't been able to talk about the plot at all, which is a good thing because it twists and turns and tumbles, and I would never give away any of the strange sort of dead ends and convoluted situations that Louis gets himself in. Narrative itself is such an important part of that. I mean, narrative is like magic in that you are leading the reader down around all these sort of blind spots, and it's truly entertaining, and will keep you guessing till the last few pages. I hope there'll be many more thrillers for Louis Warlock, but one of the things about all of that I found so moving really is the theme of magic as a kind of coping mechanism for this quite vulnerable man, and he certainly gets into some very vulnerable situations. Was that something that was part of the idea right from the beginning? I mean, some of the magic tricks sort of help in everyday life, or the attitudes behind magic. Jeremy, can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't know if it was consciously there from the beginning, but it certainly presented itself as we were working that that's where he was vulnerable, and that the magic would help with that. I mean, because of course it's in the very first scene when we meet him as a kid, as Andy's already spoken about, and that's definitely rooted in the truth of, certainly for me, and I think many people who perform magic, you tend to be drawn to magic if you are an outlier. Magic's not full of, the world of magic is not full of athletes and hyper confident alpha males, because I think it's certainly a place that you can find power if you feel there aren't any other places that you can find power when you're a kid, and because if you have the secret, you are the one who has the knowledge, and if you are adept at it, you can entertain people with it. And certainly it was a great icebreaker I found when I was in adolescence, or when I was starting at college and university. It was a really good icebreaker. It was definitely something that I used like Louis did. I wasn't being bullied in the way that Louis was, but definitely to sort of win over a room, you could do that with a good magic trick, and I definitely delighted in that. So for me, that's probably where some of that's rooted emotionally. Andy, what about you? Because you came to magic, you were already pretty confident when you started performing.
Yeah, I was. But I mean, I think that magic has transformed my life, and I don't just mean in terms of the things that I've achieved through it or earned through it. I don't mean that they're sort of wonderful sidebars to it. I think magic as a hobby is, as you point out, Suzi, I find it quite a moving thing, because I think that what it enables you to understand is that there are solutions for impossible problems. And that I find, as you get older and there are challenges that you have to face, I find that a really profound part of it. So I love that you got that from the book, because I think it is something that is a very moving part of it, and a deeply unexpected part of magic for me, that was a gift that I only got to unwrap, as it were, when there were some big life challenges that, hit our family, and you suddenly realized, wow, there are mechanisms in place in my mind that can really help laterally with reframing this, with trying to find solutions for things, trying to enable situations that feel truly impossible. So I really love that. And it's one of the reasons that I hope that there will be people who read this book who will have their eyes opened a little bit to magic by the tricks that they learn. Because I hope the book has a very broad appeal, because whilst there are, it's by no means teenage fiction, it's got some deep, very deep sort of adult stuff in it. Nevertheless, I think that, there is a fascination with the world of magic. And I hope that mine and Jeremy's love of that and our teaching of these little gifts within it will open up to people who think, you know what, maybe we should look into doing a bit more magic and learning it as a hobby, because it's never too late to start magic, and it has many, many beautiful things in it.
I felt that Louis, so many times he has to break down the situation that he's in. He has to really calm himself, and sort of work not what's just happening, but what's happening behind what's happening, and how he can influence and affect things, even in the tiniest way. And in some situations he's in, it really is the very tiniest way that he can affect things. And it's that old thing about if you can't change your circumstances, you change your way of responding to your circumstances. And I thought this was truly original in a espionage novel. You know, it's not just about the gadget that will get you out of trouble. It's the mindset that enables you to come up with a gadget that gets you out of trouble. So, I mean, as I say, I really hope there's going to be lots more adventures, and it would make a fantastic film. So I think before I go, I'm just going to ask you both 3 questions that I'm asking everybody. So let's first start with Jeremy's favourite artwork, if you have one.
Well, I'm gonna stretch artwork to film, and it's hard to pin down one, of course. But for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to say 2001: A Space Odyssey, because that was another seeing that on a cinema screen when I was 7, not long before I went to the magic shop in Blackpool, was a similar epiphany. And again, it's full of magic tricks. That's the other thing.
Mm.
Wonderful, because so much of it is done in camera, with wonderful magical thinking, pulling off incredible effects to narrative purpose. And it is a piece of art. That's the other thing. It's probably, along with Revolution No. 9 on the White Album, it's probably the most widely disseminated piece of conceptual art there is. But it's so yeah, that looms large for me as a
fantastic Man with the Golden Gun as a runner-up there. But what about you, Andy? Do you have a favourite artwork?
I mean, I find it difficult, again, as I'm sure everybody says, to give you a specific answer. I think that my answer as a general canvas is a joke shop window. There is something it's sort of almost historical now. There are so few of them left. There's a wonderful place in Hull called Dinsdale's that's still there, but the joke shop has all but vanished. I've sort of recreated one in my study on the back of my study door, but all those practical jokes in their little packets and the hand-drawn artworks that go with them are to me a Picasso. I mean, they are. There is such excitement and power, and it's all the little worlds we've talked about. You know, the lies of the sparkly variety world within the 70s-ness of it, within the practical jokeness of it. So, as a canvas, a joke shop window for me would be my favourite artwork.
Very unusual selections there, but that's great. Jeremy, do you have a book that you've pretended to read, or you should have read by now, and you haven't got round to? What would that be?
I'll go for should have read rather than. I've stopped pretending quite a while ago, but I've read around it, but I've not read the thing itself, and that's Dante's Inferno. Well, all of it, the Divine Comedy, the whole thing. I've certainly read books about it, or started to, but that's a source of shame that I haven't actually gone to the original and worked my way through it. Now's
the time to do it. Nel mezzo del cammin. Although I don't know whether you've found yourself in a dark wood yet, but
always. But
it's waiting for you.
Not with Virgil.
Yeah, I think you can choose your own Virgil. Maybe probably a magician would take you through. Well, there's always time for that. I definitely recommend that. What about you, Andy?
Oh, I'm deeply unliterary, so I'm filled with shame. Any clever book, I've not touched any of them. I have one profoundly embarrassing memory of, for a very short time, pretending I was reading Ulysses and having it sort of open face down on a train. I must have been about 18, but no, I'm filled with shame at my lack of literary. I'm deeply populist and a fan of an easy read. So they all fill me with shame, Suzi.
It's funny. People keep mentioning Ulysses. It might come out as number one in this unofficial poll. I think there's more people pretending to have read it than we think. And Jeremy, what's the weirdest bit of feedback you've ever had about any aspect of your work, your career?
Well, I used to when Ghost Stories was on all its runs, but when it was on its first West End run, every so often, I'd go in and see it to go and give notes, keep checking it was on track. And I can remember, and of course, most people wouldn't know who I was when I was sat in the audience. So I would always sit there with some anonymity. And at the end of the show, there was a recorded announcement that said, please keep the secrets of ghost stories. Thank you. And this man who was stood next to me as we were walking out turned to his wife and said, "What? That it was shit?"
That's what you get for sitting anonymously in the audience, isn't it?
Don't be an eavesdropper.
Well, I'll dovetail onto that with when we were in Toronto to see the Toronto version of it, which it's fair to say when we got there for its penultimate preview was not in good shape. And we sat there in a fetal position in the audience. And at the end of it, as the lights went up, the guy behind us to his sort of row of 4 people went, "Well, it was Steve's choice." So for a while, we were going to call our film companies Steve's Choice Films.
Was there something to do with I don't know, the Canadians or what was the problem?
A million reasons, starting with the wrong venue. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up now. It's been fantastic talking to both of you. Have either of you got any other projects you want to tell us about in our closing minutes? I mean, I hope you're working on the next one.
Oh,
tell us you are, right?
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, that's a spoiler. That means Louis survives.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
I was determined there wasn't going to be a spoiler, but yeah. I mean, you are. I think that's a fairly obvious giveaway, really. So let's not worry too much about that. Thank you so much for joining me in the book bag today, Jeremy Dyson and Andy Nyman. It's been brilliant chatting to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzi. Thank you.
And goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. So thank you very much for watching The Book Bag for a very lively episode with 2 Renaissance men, really. We've only touched on a few of the things that they've been up to in their wonderful careers. So why don't you join me next time? Please subscribe if you enjoyed this. Like and subscribe, as they say, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.